Okay, my video got cut short last time, so this is gonna be the second video on Occult Hierarchy. And we got all the way up to about, well, I started discussing the Council of 300. I think I got a bit ahead of myself. The last level we were really talking about was, like Rosicrucian, Skull and Bone Society, people that worship Moloch. That's all about, say, about 2/3 up the ladder, up the pyramid. And then you start getting into, specific families, specific bloodlines, and those revolve around what we call ancient bloodlines. And I won't say what they are or what they mean, but there's 13 families. That's what they call them, families. 13 specific bloodlines, and by bloodlines I mean a group of individuals with essentially a family tree with special characteristics that come from in 13 different areas around the world. I won't get into much more details than that. There's a kind of what you would call a designated group of individuals according to their bloodline, according to their capabilities as well. I've seen some people who have been allowed in because of not where they come from but what they can do. I want to discuss the origins of the 13 families, or where they come from, who they are as individuals, as far as their individual families go. But what I can tell you is that there's a specific amount of people who are, I guess you could say, at the ground level of each family. They're what you would call kind of indoctrinated into understanding the styles and the lifestyle and what the purpose is of what they have to do, kind of their organizational design. Kind of each family has a purpose over the planet, and kind of has a hierarchy, and they're essentially a lordship over a specific territory, whatever that territory size might be. That's yet to be determined. Hard for me to really describe all that and say the boundaries of each family without stepping on somebody's toes. But yeah, one of the things that happens is that when a few different families start arguing, you end up with serious difficulties that occur in society. But not so much from them, but just from the disruptions that are occurring, and maybe both families don't necessarily agree on the agenda that the rest of the families have agreed upon and trying to put forward in society. Kind of like one of the examples was Queen Elizabeth II. She had corgis. She's got like the queen's swans, queen's geese, and stuff like that. And she's probably feeding her corgis dog food, which has got meat in it. But there came a time where I don't know if this ever really got into the public, because I came to London, I started talking to people around there, and they had no idea that there's an agenda to where they were working on trying to publicize eating crickets. They're putting it in the children's food in their schools, like kind of just like having an assembly to encourage the kids to eat like crickets like they're chips. And so they were trying to push this agenda as an alternative form of protein, which chitin isn't digestible by the body. If you have an overabundance of that, you can eat a little bit, but if you have an overabundance of it, it will go through your system and kind of like, how do you say, it's not like keratin where it grows fingernails and hair. You'll end up with issues, kind of like, I would assume probably like cysts throughout your body, because your body would reject it, would probably collect it into a spherical form, isolate it by putting some sort of pouch or pocket around it. That's essentially what a cyst is. It's an isolation of a material that the body rejects And that's precisely what chitin does in the body. When you have an overabundance, your body will start to reject it, and you'll start forming stuff like cysts. So Queen Elizabeth, you know, is feeding her dogs meat, and I'm pretty sure she didn't agree with that part of the program, part of the agenda, saying, you know, let them eat bugs, because she was a wise old lady, right? I mean, she served as a nurse in World War II, and you know, she's got pictures of her shooting a Tommy gun and stuff like that when she's a teenager. And I would say that she's a pretty upstanding monarch when it comes down to it. One of the couple benevolent monarchs that we have in this world to this day. Unfortunately, she's no longer with us. God rest her soul. The other benevolent ruler or dictator, I would say, is the gentleman that runs Singapore. I don't know his name, I forget, but he seems to be fairly benevolent in a lot of different ways. And I can't say entirely because I don't know too much about the guy, but what I can say is that from what I see in the society and the way it's run, how it's flourishing and thriving, you can't have a society flourish and thrive without having some sort of freedom and some sort of positive benefit to the people at the ground floor. So that being said, shortly after they had that agenda that was going on, which I'm privy to, I don't know if very many other people were privy to that, or if that was just something that was thrown my way in advance to see what I had to say about it. And I said no, because we're not supposed to really eat bugs as a main protein source. We don't digest. I said, why don't we just take those fucking crickets and throw them to the chickens, right? And then the chickens can make eggs, and you can eat that protein because they'll digest it down. They can digest it, they can absorb it, they can basically rearrange the molecules to take that and turn it into something that's digestible for humans. And so, you know, they're a very efficient creature, so you don't end up with much loss when it comes to, you know, with the input versus the output. So the input would be the chicken eating the crickets, and the output would be popping out the eggs. So they're one of the most efficient creatures on the planet. And I was like, why would you make people eat bugs when you can just feed the bugs to chickens, have a one-step process, and then feed them eggs? You know, like, who on God's green earth thought that it was a good idea to start feeding people bugs? And so shortly after that agenda was put into, I don't know, whoever's hands that it was put into, I guess it probably got shared amongst the families, a group of a bunch of different people, and there's kind of probably a say aye or say nay. There's a vote, and I'm pretty sure that the majority said nay, because that agenda kind of got wiped underneath the rug. And shortly after that, if I remember right, she got pneumonia and died. And so I don't know if that's a coincidence or if that was just, you know, just unfortunate timing. But yeah, she's one to be missed, we'll put it that way. She was cool. Anyways, you know, that's kind of some of the things that you hear about, and I suspect it would be like the dark side of the pyramid, right? Because there's a dark side and there's a light side. I would say that the dark side would have probably been the ones who had proposed that agenda, you know, kind of like Marie Antoinette, let them eat cake, which she was talking about the crumbs in the pan. She wasn't talking about let the peasants eat cake. She ate the cake, and she said let them eat the crumbs in the bottom of the pan. So that was kind of a cruel thing to say to starving people while she's in there fattening up eating cake. So obviously they beheaded her for that, right? It's kind of the same thing if you're telling your commoners, your peasants to eat bugs, you know, then the consequences can be dire. So we're talking about the ground level, we're talking about the 13 families. There's a large amount of people who are essentially the ground level of the 13 families, which is what you would call the top of the pyramid. I wouldn't say the capstone. The capstone would be the Council of 300, the Council of 30, the Council of 13. Right underneath that, when you see on the United States $1 bill, there's an open gap. That open gap represents the separation between the lower levels and the upper levels, and the middle level, which is invisible, would be the people who are on the ground floor of the Illuminati. they're not to be seen. You won't know who they are. You won't know what they're about, what their agenda is, because the upper echelon, which is the councils, will make sure that they kind of dictate their plans, their goals, and it's all hidden. It's all in secret code. It's all puzzles and stuff like that, to where no one really can decode that unless you're really good at that. And that's why there's a separation between this capstone and the rest of the pyramid on the dollar, is because the people who work at that level are meant to be invisible. So they're not meant to be known, they're not meant to be seen, and those would be people that you would kind of consider ghosts in the machine. And well, they kind of make new policies, new agendas come into play. That's their goal, and they push that down to the lower levels through whatever methods they might use. Nothing I will discuss or tell you. Bless you. Gesundheit. So yeah, I think that one of the best ways to describe that is that's the invisible level. You could call that the level that nobody knows about and nobody can pass, because it's one of those things where only if you can understand, overstand, recognize, realize, believe, whatever you want to call it. It's a spiritual matter, and it's a struggle, we'll put it that way. So there's a council of 300. That's a group of 300 people from the 13 families, and they're all essentially elected, chosen over a group of a large amount of people, in which they'll say, we like this guy, we like this girl, we agree with what he has to say, what he stands for, who he is. Those people will be watched for a long period of time, kind of figure them out, understand their quirks. So pretty much everything will be known about them. Every single little thing will be known about them, down to the details, anything it might be. It could be what toothpaste they use, just anything. How often they cut their hair, what hairstyle they like, what's their favorite food, any of that. What's their blood type. So all those things are essentially put down on. They write a dossier on those individuals, and so they kind of figure out who they are, what they're about, what their agenda is, what their moral character is, if they're easily persuaded, easily corrupted, and it's trial and tested. You go through the gauntlet of fire, you go through Dante's Inferno, whatever you want to call it. It becomes a very